has changed now. It's not only about physical infrastructure. The challenges we face today are largely about information. How does your network react to stimulus in the system? How does it adapt? How does it adapt with millions of people's lives on the line? And what are the expectations of transportation infrastructure today? Just to give you, I read this online, that sensors on a transportation infrastructure network today, in 1 year, generates more information than a transportation department could process in a decade just 20 years ago. And that is what the challenges that transportation infrastructure face today. So we'll get into that a little bit as we talk about this today. It's not just about the technology. The technology is there. It's present. It's not that challenge anymore. Over the last couple of years especially, we're seeing the rate of technology advances increase particularly fast. It's about capability, and it's about culture, and it's about people as well. So we will cover and talk about the questions of how you adapt to technology to scale and transform infrastructure today. How many of you have heard about pilots that have stalled, about things that just get in and we're all excited about it and we think it's going to change the world, but it never seems to materialize? And that's really the challenge that we're focused on today. And I'm delighted to have our panelists here with us. We missed our Sunday brunch this week, so I'm going to read the introductions for folks. Do the cardinal sin and read the introductions for folks. Right here we have Ian Burgess. He's a public sector leader at Google GCP, where he works at the intersection of cloud infrastructure, AI, and public sector transformation. Google has become one of the most consequential technology partners in transportation networks globally. From traffic prediction through Google Maps, used by over 1 billion people, to cloud and AI platforms that underpin smart cities initiatives across multiple continents. Ian brings us a perspective of technology organizations that operate at a scale most of us find genuinely difficult to comprehend, and who's seen what works and what doesn't when digital capability meets the real world. Ian, thank you very much. In the middle, we have James Colclough. He's a leader in digital transformation in the UK's transportation infrastructure. As a transformation digital lead at AECOM, James brings over 2 decades of experience in driving digital innovation across major programs. His work currently is at the sharp end of the industry's biggest challenge, moving from experimental technologies to resilient large-scale delivery. By championing data analytics and AI to enhance operational performance and decision-making, James is helping bridge the gap between global digital expertise and local infrastructure. And last but not least, we have Malcolm Lowe. Malcolm is a seasoned digital and technology leader with a career spanning nearly 4 decades across multiple sectors, including consulting, government, finance, utilities, retail, and transport. He loves doing stuff with users, for users, using digital technology, people, and data, bringing together his curiosity, creative thinking, and love of technology to bring pragmatic solutions to interesting business problems. Currently, his digital and technology leadership has been key in navigating the complexities of one of the UK's most dynamic transit networks, ensuring that Manchester grows, its transport system remains efficient, integrated, and forward-thinking, transforming the region's transport infrastructure into an integrated, digitally enabled, user-centric system. And most importantly, if you want to thank people about the B network, you start with this man here. So thank you.
Only if it works.
Thank you and welcome. So why don't we, instead of going through and doing just question and answers, if we can have a bit of a discussion today. Let's talk about the pace of AI and technology. This is happening in days. And the change in technology for infrastructure and transport organization sometimes takes years and decades. How do you reconcile between the pace of change that's happening in technology and the capabilities that people expect transportation organizations to have? So I'll open it up to anyone. Maybe Malcolm, if we can start with you and then go around and just have a react to this.
Just run that question past me again. I was trying to answer the first bit when you're going to the second bit.
As you wish.
I think there is a real, it is a real cultural challenge, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of transport organisations have come from a world of civil infrastructure, and the ways of delivering, or the approaches in terms of delivering civil infrastructure, don't really apply to the current world and organisations who want to be sort of digital. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think but what we shouldn't do is try and apply the approaches in digital to civil infrastructure in its entirety. It's very easy to create a digital capability and then say that doesn't work and we'll try it and we'll pivot somewhere else. You can't do that if you're building a bus interchange and go, well, that wall, we thought it was all right there, we'll knock that wall down and we'll build it somewhere else. So I think you shouldn't try to apply digital capabilities to civil infrastructure capabilities. But I think in terms of sort of the part of this sort of topic in terms of turning digital capability into delivery at scale, I think it's about understanding that digital, and I've said this in a previous sort of session, digital isn't technology. Digital isn't a website. Digital is a culture. It's a way of working. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of doing things. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges and capabilities in terms of getting organisations to think and work in like a digital organisation, like an Amazon or a Google or something like that. And the way to do that, and the way we've done it in Transport for Greater Manchester, is by doing it to show what it actually means and the value it can get delivered, rather than just talking about theory. So a good example would be the contactless ticketing on the tram network. We could have done it a traditional old way approach, and like you do civil infrastructure, big set of requirements, go out, procure something, spend 2 years delivering it, and then bang, it goes live on the first day. And by then, what people wanted it 2 years ago isn't what they want now. People have forgotten about it, etc. So the way we did it with in Manchester is we started small. We did what we call an alpha, which was just getting the thing to hang together. And then we did a private beta, which was sort of invitation only, tested it on the network. If your name isn't on the list, you can't come in type thing. Did that for at least a year. And then we turned it on July the 19th. It was work first time, but it was it was like a minimum viable product type thing. It just did daily capping, and that was all it did. And then we built up from there, and I think and by showing that and doing that, the organisation has now realised that that's the best way to deliver sort of those digital things all in a digital way. I hope that answers your question, BJ.
And Ian, coming from a company that is creating some of this disruption, if you will, because Google solves problems at scale, and when they do, everybody hears about it, and it creates expectations. I mean, what's your view around the things that Google are solving in the world, and by extension in transportation infrastructure, and the ability to scale those things?
Thank you. The working for, and I've got some of my colleagues here, the working for Google gift is it's sort of this double-edged sword. People think that we can do anything. And on one level, we are a technology company. We have a bunch of data centers, we have a bunch of models, we've got a bunch of racks with chips and everything on that, and we have applications on top of that. But there's and I'm not saying it's hyped, because the attitude in Google is we can do anything. And so I think the most important thing to probably understand first is our own business is being disrupted. So with a bunch of engineers who are used to writing code, now a significant amount of that is done by AI. And so the speed at which our business is moving is frightening even for those who are inside it. What do we do to maintain control of that? And I touched on this earlier today at something else. When you say infrastructure at Google, infrastructure is data centers. Infrastructure is networks, as in cabling and Ethernet networks. And so that infrastructure that we build, we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to get right, because if you don't get that basic infrastructure right, everything else on top is a waste of time. I think there's significant parallels with transport infrastructure as well. There are some real basics you need to get right. So just understanding how do those two worlds come together, because we can build at the speed of a data center, but we can then deliver code at ridiculous speeds as well. How do the two things come together, and how can Google have an impact in transport, I think is the answer. Yeah, sorry, question you're asking. There's been very little mention. So most of the panels I've either sat in and listened to, when AI has been raised, it's been answered by a data question, which is probably absolutely right? Because if you haven't got the data, the rest is a waste of time. But how much data do you really need? Because I've also heard a lot about standards. And that's fine because it's a data sharing ability, but I'm not sure we need that level of, there's a level of focus on standards which I don't think other people would do to even get to a POC or an understanding. I think we would just get on and prove something. So let me go back to the Malcolm's, the digital mentality, the speed with which you can change and raise stuff and do stuff. I'm not sure transportation and the infrastructure around it has quite got to that grasping at what's available and what's out there. What do we like to do? My favorite phrase is just challenge us. Ask us, can you do this? We'll give it a go, right? How hard can it be, is the attitude that we have. And yes, I've worked in public sector. Yes, I have spent my time with procurement regulations, and yes, I've done all that. And do I still have optimism that we can challenge and change and do all of that and move at the speed of Google? Yes. I think we just need to challenge ourselves and get going.
And James, kind of thinking about this as you roll up your sleeves and deliver some of this technology, what's been your experience when almost as you're working, you're getting disrupted by new things coming in?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if, your introduction, a couple of decades or a seasoned professional, I was trying to work out which was most flattering there, but I've seen a lot of evolutions and hypes around certain technologies, etc. If I look back at, I started my career in sort of the geospatial space and then moved into the BIM world and now more into data analytics and obviously AI. And I think the slight change at the moment is that, I'll go home, my kids are using AI, or, people I'm just trying to sell to internally are already using some form of AI or data, and et cetera, whereas they weren't necessarily going home and playing with a BIM model, right? So there's a shift, I guess, in terms of whether that is at an advantage to you or disadvantage, because it's coming with preconceptions. It maybe comes with some failures that they're saying, well, and they're branding AI all the same, right? And data analytics or whatever it is, it's being branded under AI, which is pros and cons to that, I guess. So, but what we're seeing is a lot of interaction with the technology outside the workplace, which was interesting, which brings a different sense in when you get at work, that people are coming with preconceived ideas, etc. But they may be more willing to play with that and have a go. The other change I see is that we've kind of been focused around certain functional solutions. Certainly when I look at AECOM and the industry, so we might need a carbon tool, or we might need a bit of program management tool here, right? It's been sort of, it's at a specific functionality and capability we need. Whereas the current position around sort of data analytics and AI, it's so vast that it's trying to be very focused around that, I think. So we're seeing certain tools coming in around AI that have got specific use cases, but there's also that general, we want to use better data, better AI functionality to help with day-to-day business, just to speed us up, as everybody else is trying to do in their sort of daily lives as well.
And it's interesting, we've heard data come up a couple of times, and the attitudes around data and data sovereignty vary by region. Let's take the example of India. India just put 300 of its largest public sector infrastructure data sets online for anybody to solve. And basically having citizens and people saying, have a go at it, solve things for us. What's your commentary or view on the importance of data sovereignty and keeping that data in-house versus making it public for people to solve problems like India has just done on several of its largest metropolitan areas? It's just a different attitude in different geos, I think.
So I'm a big believer in opening data up and giving it out to the community. We do that in Transport for Greater Manchester. We open up as much data as possible, and we'll continue to do that. Because I'm a big believer in there are people out there who can probably create better services than we can, and we have great ideas and some things that we'd never heard of. A great example I heard of a few years ago was, I think it was New South Wales, opened up the data in terms of how heavy their trams were. And some clever person in their bedroom came up with an algorithm that using that data, they could work out how many people were actually on the tram, so you could actually see how busy the trams were. Now that's something that, you know, if they hadn't opened up that data, that service wouldn't have existed. And I know an example in Manchester a few years ago, because we opened up our tram data. There was a bar in the northern quarter that took that data, and it had sort of this screen on the back of the bar which told them when the next sort of tram came, etc. So people who were in the bar could say, I could just get one extra drink in before the next sort of tram comes along. I've heard about people who've taken some of our data and created Alexa skills, so people can talk to the Alexa and go, tell me when the next tram is, or what's the how often the trams are from Bury to the centre of Manchester, which is a great service, especially for those who have got certain disabilities. It's great for accessibility. And again, another great service, gets opened up, someone publishes it openly, it benefits lots and lots of people. So I'm a big fan of opening up data and letting the community create great services and better services than maybe we can, and more services than we could possibly do. So I'm a big believer in opening up data.
And Ian, do I even need to ask the stance that Google will have on it?
So Google are very much, thank you, Google are very much an open source business anyway, and we gift our data to many people. And actually that's something, the extent to which with which we do that surprised me when I joined Google. You would think, no, hoard it and monetize it and do something with it, use it as a revenue stream, and we don't. Because if you make it available, people will come, and they will keep coming. And you've seen that from search, and you've seen that from YouTube, and you've seen that from various other things we do. So that's the Google mentality. How much can you do that, and still will people join in and do it with you? Is the point where I'm trying to get to. Sorry, is I'm not sure that it's all equal, and I'm not sure everybody's doing it in the same level. There's a mistrust sometimes about the veracity of data. I quite understand that, but I think basically offer up the data would be the Google way. Let people use it, let people understand it, and they will come back, which they do.
And in delivery, do you think that it poses a challenge when you're trying to achieve an objective around a program that you're doing, but somebody else just comes in from the margins and says, well, here we go. How do you think we react to something like that?
Well, there's a couple of points, I suppose, from a consultancy point of view. Obviously, we're working within the requirements of our public sector clients in terms of where they want us to hold the data, and that sometimes we have to adjust the way we're working, particularly where AECOM is a big global company. We might have data stored in the US, and we have to have a sensible conversation about whether it has to be stored in the UK, and some of those constraints or requirements, let's call them, and having a conversation. Sometimes there's some flexibility around that. But certainly opening up the data, because obviously we work with big public sector clients, and sometimes it's not easy to share that data internally within that organisation. So it may be that because they've opened it up into a data hub or whatever that's publicly available, it's easier to get access even you're working with one part of the client group. It's not been shared internally so well. So that just opens it up for us working with that particular client as well, is the point I'd like to make.
I'd just like to add as well, I think it's more than just opening up data as well. One of the things we're thinking about in Transport for Greater Manchester is opening up APIs for others to use services. So the mobile app that we've created, the B Network app, has been created in such a way that the engine at the back that does all the fares calculations is loosely coupled to the front end, which is the thing that everybody sees on the mobile phone. The reason why we've done that is gives us opportunities to then open up that FARS engine and embed it in third parties like Google Maps or Citymapper or Apple Maps or something. So somebody could come to Manchester, uses Google, because everybody uses Google or Apple Maps or something like that, looks at it, says, oh, I need to catch that tram or that bus, etc. And you can buy a ticket from within the product that you actually use, rather than having to force visitors to Manchester to download the B Network app. Because if you did that, you would have probably an app for every single city you went to in the world, and no one's going to do that.
Right.
There's a common denominator. So it's not just opening up data. We're also thinking about how can we open up some of our services and transactional services to make it better for the customer and the user of transport in Greater Manchester.
I wish every transport department thought like you did, because you often do have to download the app for every single city. We've covered the availability and advances of AI. We've talked about the availability of data. The end of this, the title of this talk is Delivery at Scale. But we often see a lot of failure for that scaling and resiliency. Why do you think that happens? Why do you think that we're in an age where you can solve pretty much anything? We have the tools. The price of technology continues to get lower and lower. The accessibility for people to do things with that technology continues to increase. So it feels like we have the ingredients to do transformation at scale, yet we're very often just stuck in pilots. We are facing resistance to it. And what do you think is the blocker for actually transforming?
Yeah, let me, because that question has been sort of hovering around this whole event, which is great. I think we've got two schools of thought. One is very much proper, hardcore infrastructure, rail, buildings, tunnels, bridges. They don't just get magicked up by data centers, right? And nobody should pretend they do, and there is a very well-trodden and well-rehearsed path to do that extremely well in the UK, which it does. The other bit is, we're at an age of AI and there's wonder out there, and isn't that great? I think we're trying, so a lot of the conversation, if I can sort of paraphrase, is there a Venn diagram here where there's this bit in the middle that AI can unlock all of the wonder and speed up physical infrastructure projects for benefit? I wish I knew the answer. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer. I'm sure everybody's going to go, great, here it is. I wish I knew the answer. I'm going to leap a few years hence. I think AI will be successful in infrastructure, physical infrastructure, when it is invisible. So when people are doing planning, they're using AI. When people are designing buildings, they're using AI. When they're looking at people movements, they're using AI. When they're understanding how much our planet is heating up, they're using AI. So it's become ubiquitous. It's not AI is going to build a building and do that for, no, it won't, not for a while. I was struck by, I was in Dubai a couple of weeks ago. The leader of, he's His Excellency, but he's the Minister for AI. His proud boast, I don't mean that as a bad way, they are going to invest significantly in AI. Why? Because this is a massive infrastructure country. Clearly, they are world leaders in many, many things. Where they realized was 500 years ago, the Middle East was ahead in technology in everything. Probably one of the most advanced scientific and technical regions in the world. He said, then out came a new technology and we deliberately failed to embrace it. And that has put us ever since behind the curve to Western technologies and Western science. That technology, that discovery was the printing press. And for a whole bunch of their own reasons, they decided not to embrace that. And they see that as put them behind the curve. He stood there in front of thousands of us and said, that's never happening again. So do we know what it's going to do? No. Do we know it's going to be better? Yes. And we are going to use that to build our business going forwards. That vision and that promise, I think, is wonderful. And I worry that we end up in the UK falling into two camps. We will get into the built infrastructure and we get into AI. I think the two are going to merge very soon if we embrace it and carry on.
James, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's. I think a lot of the other panel sessions have talked about culture, haven't they? That's certainly a massive part of this. And the panel I sort of sat in on was talking about the types of industries and inherently being safety-led, and there have been some nervousness around technology in general, or at least change, right? We've got maybe a safe process, so any changes to that process has to give them the same level of certainty in terms of it's going to be safe. So some of the industries we're working in here inherently have a inertia not to maybe change as quick as some other sectors. But that's no different if we're talking AI or digital technology or whatever. It's basically the same, right? So there's that cultural bit. I think internally within some of the work that we've been doing at AECOM, certainly we've got to sell it internally. And a lot of that is, if it's easy to use, it gets used. And so that barrier to use, in some of the AI applications, it's just easy to use, right? You type it in to LLM model, you speak in the same language, or, it's an easy interface. So that takes away some of those barriers to people just having a go and learning it. It's not always been the case on some of those digital tools or capabilities. So I think taking away those barriers to the user, making it very easy for them to use this, like you say, becoming invisible. And things are becoming invisible. I mean, even I was in Teams the other day, and I was doing some stuff, and I was like, oh, right, that's a new capability. That was invisible to me, right? I was interacting with it. So that's coming into the engineering design space, certainly for us. We're seeing more applications come in. We roll those out.
He meant Google Workplace, so he didn't.
I was going to talk to him later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those two things, culture, obviously, that we mentioned a lot, but just for me, I'm always trying to take away the barrier in terms of to the user, make it easy for them. They'll adopt it.
And interestingly, in my travels at least, I see a big difference between the East and the West currently in adoption. Are you seeing that too in terms of the willingness to fail at scale and take on more? Is that something you see as well? And as we look at the UK, what needs to maybe change in terms of that? And maybe that's a loaded question. We don't have to answer it, but what do you think? What is your observations on that? And I'll come on and invite you to think about that.
I don't travel very often to the Far East, so I couldn't answer that particular question. My observation around transport, and I'm going to be, and I've mentioned this yesterday, I'm going to be brutally honest. So I came into transport about 9 years ago, and I thought I had gone back 10 years in terms of technology delivery. And because one of the reasons I joined was because the organisation recognised it needed to change, but didn't know how to change to become a digital transport organisation. And I still see that the transport's slightly behind the curve in terms of being digital in its truest sense. It's getting there. It's a lot different now than it was sort of 9 years ago. If I'd have come to an Interchange conference 9 years ago and gone around talking about digital or agile delivery or something like that, probably thought I was speaking some sort of foreign language. But I think it's changing, and I think AI is an overused word, but I think it's an opportunity to raise the profile and the capability of how to be digital in the current world, because it's on everybody's sort of agenda at this moment in time. Nobody knows really what it means, and so we need to be AI, we need to do this and the other. And I think for digital and technology professionals within organisations, it's an opportunity to grab that and actually use it to bring the organisation into the 21st century to become true digital organisations, doing things like failing fast, doing things like minimum viable products, doing things like we don't actually know what the answer is. We know what the problem is, but we don't know how to solve that problem. We're going to try it and learn as we go along. And it's much easier in the digital space than it is in the, I admit, you can't apply that to the civil infrastructural space yet, because they're big capital expenditure projects. There's probably elements of you can do it, but like I say, you couldn't build a new tram line to Stockport in an agile way and go, right, we'll lay some tracks here, and if it doesn't work, we'll dig them all up and lay them down there. Yeah, you could, theoretically, you could do it, but, it'd be a braver man than I would do something like that.
I mean, could you maybe talk a little bit about, so the B network is one of the most successful reintegrations in the country, right? And could you talk a little bit about the thought process you had around the digital and the information side of this as you were thinking through that whole process?
I'm a big believer in principle-based strategies and delivery rather than trying to guess what the end game is, writing it down, and then just slavishly trying to get to that, because the world changes, and things happen along the way. You're never going to deliver that. So we have a set of guiding principles that we design, build, and deliver everything against. Some of them are technical principles, like cloud first and security from the start, etc. But some of them are more sort of a business around. We'll make sure that the data is open and accessible by other parts of the organisation, that everything's interoperable and things like that. So that's how we navigated towards sort of the B network. We didn't go, right, okay, that's the end game in 2030. Let's try and work out what that actually looks like, because it's impossible to predict the future. If I could predict the future, I'd know what the winning lottery tickets were this Friday, and I wouldn't be sat here. So it's about having some guardrails that go in, and being honest that we'll sort of deviate, but we're going in the right direction. That's how we did it with the B network, and continue to do it with the B network.
James, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, just sort of going back a stage, I guess you're asking us to think about the sort of global differences. I think if I look at the AECOM business, we've got sort of pockets of expertise, but generally speaking, and I'm talking over the time I've sort of been in this industry, where we've got a client that's pushing in that mix with us as well, that's when it's really worked for us, because back to the cultural piece, there's an extra incentive. They're asking the question, they're pushing a bit harder. We've got some of our clients which are maybe a bit more silent on the digital approach, then there's a bit less incentive, right? And we're not having those conversations. So generally, their adoption of where they are on that sort of adoption scale is generally lower down. It's less mature. So I think for me, it's been that combination of everybody involved in projects, programs, schemes. If they're all on the same page and trying to drive together, then that's brought about a better level of adoption. And when I look globally, I see that also. I see some pockets where we've got some really digital cities pockets in Asia, for example, and they've got a really good technical balance, but they've also got clients that are working with them, and it's that mix together has brought about a higher level of adoption.
Right.
A good test is if an organisation say we're doing digital technology, they're not very mature, because they're doing digital technology. What's non-digital technology? Yeah, digital and technology are two different. Yeah,
Printing
different
press. Yeah, there we go. I think all of you have touched on culture a little bit. Part of that is trust, and I think as we hear about the adoption and scaling of AI, culture not to adopt it, you hear a lot about, I don't trust it yet. It could hallucinate. It could do this. It could do things that are not intended. So how would you think about that and come back to people and get them to trust the technology a bit more?
So anyone who works for Google has had somebody say, I used that ChatGPT thing of yours, and you go, it's not even ours. And I asked it this, and it gave me the wrong answer. Barnsley didn't win the World Cup in whatever. No, I know that. So there is, I think if we're trying to head that off, we'll never get there, frankly. It's like, I was talking to a friend of mine, he's on the board of Rentokil, the pest exterminators. Everybody comes to, people go, I had a mouse in my kitchen. So there's a little bit of that going on, is that everybody's got a view on everybody else's business, but not really, a personal view, and they're more than entitled to it. I think everybody has to go on their own AI journey together. I don't, me telling you trust it is never going to work for anything at all. You have to go on your own journey. I think some people will find personal parts of it. I've worked with clinicians in the NHS, some of who are massively skeptical. Others know that this is going to transform cancer diagnosis. And they're all in, absolutely all in, saying, this is game-changing, this is my career, I think this is wonderful. And others saying, and quite rightly, it didn't quite catch the notes from my patient when we were doing it on that, and therefore I needed to look at the final piece to make sure it was right. As in, there's a human in the loop. I've got no problem with that either. I think I'd trust a doctor to catch the end solution as well. So I think everybody needs to go on their journey with it. I do think there are elements of AI, when I talk about it becoming invisible, doesn't mean you don't check it, just means you're comfortable with the error rate that it's going to produce. Humans produce lots of errors as well. I think we should be aware of that and comfortable with that. So the adoption, it would be good when we're here next year and the year after and the year after. I'm not even sure we're going to be talking about that. I think the speed of adoption of AI is going to be ridiculously fast. And we're going to be talking about why are we doing it that way. If I come back to, I'm sorry, it's a hobby horse in government. Why is government not adopting AI faster, government departments? I think if you've seen DCIT or you've seen I.AI or Number 10, I think they've got frustrated with it too. They are pushing individual departments to go faster. There is a whole bunch of AI startups and incubators who have done nothing. They've done the expenses thing faster, or they've done something else. I think what we need is industrial scale government sponsorship of AI intervention in government processes, and we're starting to see the beginnings of that, which I think is very encouraging. And use whichever technology you want, look at whichever process you want, but I think there's a tolerance in the highest levels of government. And I think, if anything, the UK government is very ambitious for AI to transform our nation. So I do see the positivity in the UK government. We're still going to have skeptics who haven't quite seen Barnsley win the World Cup yet, unfortunately.
Just a point in terms of, as we see this roll out, I think our stance is we want people to have a go, be curious, raise issues, but also work within the boundaries, constraints, and not trust it, right? We want people not to trust it, because we do not want to get to that complacent point where we are producing outputs and not checking those and relying on it, right? So there's definitely a narrative at the moment to, get your hands dirty, use it, feedback, issues, problems, but you've got to go through our quality control process, because whatever goes out the door from us has got our name on it. So there's that sort of healthy balance between the two there.
I think it's the culture. The culture thing is a really hard nut to crack. I think there was a great session this morning with one of your colleagues, Bolly, about this, and I asked a similar question about it. It was about AI is probabilistic, not deterministic, and people think AI equals a computer, therefore it's always going to be right. 1 + 1 always equals 2. But in the world of AI, it doesn't. It's statistically, it'll give you a probability back in terms of the answer. And we humans don't like uncertainty. Yeah, we don't like uncertainty. Statistically, a self-driving car is safer than a human driver. Yet people would rather trust a human driver than a self-driving car. And it's a cultural change. And I think it will change over time, but it's a long journey. I think that's probably one of the hardest things. There are certain AI areas where it's a lot easier. So there was someone on panel this morning from Viva City that do the CCTV cameras that look at traffic flows, and they use AI to determine what the traffic is, and then they'll make some decisions on terms of changing the sequencing of traffic signals. And the way they overcome that cultural is they'll run it, and the human will make a decision, and the AI will make a decision, and then the AI's sometimes right and the humans and sometimes wrong, and the humans right and wrong sometimes. But then it helps people sort of say, oh, it's good enough, and they'll go with it. But I think there are other sort of use cases where there's always that nervousness, because and I think it's a cultural thing. A computer is always right because 1 + 1 equals 2. AI equals a computer, therefore it must be always right. But we all know, as professionals, that's not the case, and it's a real cultural change. And I just don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it'll probably change over time as people start to understand it. So, like Waymo, there's one outside, that's big in San Francisco at the moment in time. I think they're going to do a trial in London. I think that may change it, may change the attitude, but I think there'll always be the Daily Mail headlines of self-driving car has crashed and killed somebody. It's doom and gloom. It should never be on the roads. Yeah, but it's still safer than a human. So, you know, I don't. You know, I'm a technologist. I don't know what the answer is. It's a human behavioural thing.
Can I jump back on the Waymo
Please,
one?
yes.
Hopefully I'm not being defensive. Waymo is a Google company. The thought that somebody shared with me about the future of AV, so autonomous vehicles. AV used to be audio-visual, and we've changed it, haven't we? It's now autonomous vehicles,
true.
but that's fine. They used a parallel akin to seatbelts. And I'm old enough to remember that you didn't always put your seatbelt on, or we had a big campaign, and then seatbelts became the law, and then you had to wear them front and back, and et cetera, et cetera.
Smoking in planes.
All of the above, right? For all sorts of obvious reasons. And they said, you'll get to the point at the end of an evening or something, somebody says, right, I'm just going to go and drive myself home. And everybody goes, and it's like, I'm going to drive without a seatbelt, or I'm going to have a few drinks and I'm going to drive home. Statistically, AVs are, ours at least, is safer.
Yeah, that's true.
Other brands are available. But statistically, you're right, they're safer. And so there is that hump to get over. But you're quite right, there's going to be plenty of Daily Mail headlines in the way. But I think that humans will want to go home safely at some point. And I think smoking, drinking, and seatbelts will all be great examples of it.
Would you, any of you, trust an answer from an AI that's been validated by 3 other AIs? Just a fun question.
Not at the moment. When I say trust, I mean trust it and to use it.
Yeah, trust it.
Trust
to use
it, not as
critique.
There's still a human.
Your
in that
AI
loop.
answer being critiqued by other because they don't agree all the time.
No, depends what the question is.
Yeah.
What shall I watch on TV tonight? I don't care what the answer is, really. No, if it's a diagnosis, I think I might have second and third opinions from a human.
Yeah, design me a bridge. We need an engineer on the end of that loop. But that's where we are today. Yeah.
So I'm gonna end with one question for each of you. The same question. If there's one thing that you could change, and it could be regulatory policy, it could be the type of tech, it could be a mandate, one thing that you could change that would drive delivery at scale for the most important technologies into infrastructure, what would it be? And for a bonus question, what would that piece of infrastructure be that you would want to drive more technology into?
You're talking civil infrastructure?
Correct, civil infrastructure, transport. And I think we can start with the first one. What would you, Ian, you started to answer, I think, earlier when you talked about government kind of driving change and the need to have kind of more change driven from there. And do you want to build on that one a little bit?
I would like to hear if my colleagues had an answer ready to go, to be honest. I'm sorry.
I've got one if you want.
There you go.
What I would change?
Yeah.
Public sector procurement. Yeah, it is the pain of probably the pain of my life and the pain of all the people on the other side of the fence's life. Yeah. I personally don't think it gives you the outcomes that it's intended to. But that's my personal view, not the organisation's view.
That's a good one. That drives a lot of change meaningfully.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say contracts as well, so it's probably the same thing, right? I was spent a lot of my time trying to support major programs or clients with getting the right contractual language around the requirements to do things, just to enable that. I was saying before around the clients helping things to move forward. I was just trying to get that into a lot of the, whether it's data or whether it's the ways of working and processes and things like that. And it's maybe not exactly the sort of AI conversation that maybe where we're going, but a lot of it has been driven through some of those contractual relationships and the procurement process.
So thank you for the thinking time, colleagues. The one thing that I would want to, and we do this, so I'm not saying we don't, because everyone can give me a great example. But this is very much a Google thing, a Google belief, is don't lose sight of the end user. That has to be what it's about, right? And I think procurement, contracts, lose sight of the end user. What are we trying to do? The excellent report that Deloitte did, the State of the State, said, so what if I can book a doctor's appointment quicker? Am I going to give good advice when I'm there? Is it worth it when I get there, etc.? So I think that we get too revved up about the planning and the infrastructure and the construction and the AI. There's poor users, not poor, but there are users that we are doing this for, and I think that's, particularly in the public sector, that's what we need to keep focused on.
And here I thought when I asked the question, it would be something around bridges or timetables or stuff like that, but it's very, very achievable things that we can go after that actually can get solved today, but it's a lack of directive and will to get to it. But
We'll give an example. I know we're going to finish off, but I'll give an example is that on major, not in the UK, but major high-speed rail contract, they literally hadn't put into the supply chain contracts to get the data off them, right? So they were trying to do something centrally with information that it didn't have. It was out there, but they didn't have it. So that was, for me, the starting point. You got to request that. You got to start that conversation to say, we want this. And sometimes it's not in the interest of that organization to provide it. Maybe it's not helping them necessarily for what they're doing, but in the grand scheme of things, it's going to help with another activity. So that's why I mention it, because we could talk in general digital here and data and AI, but trying to get that data across as a foundational level, then we can start to do things with it, whether it be digital twin or whatever.
right. Well, Malcolm, James, Ian, thank you very much for your time today and joining us. And hopefully you gave the audience and those watching on telly a sense of optimism, because a lot of what we talked about is actually practical and meaningful to deliver value at scale. The technology is here today. We don't need to wait for it. There are changes and things that we can do to actually make an impact for the positive. Thank you very much.